I'm getting a late start to making this video, so I'm starting it in the later part of the afternoon, but I'm starting by making some sourdough bread for tomorrow. But I have tried making sourdough bread before many times and have never successfully done it since we've lived here. So I'm not going to share the recipe yet just because I don't even know if it's going to work. I've tried 4 or 5 different times, and I actually had to create a whole new sourdough starter. If you follow me over on Instagram, then I made a sourdough starter with a lot of you over on Instagram, and we made one together in stories. It's probably been at least a couple months. I cannot remember how long it's been, but that initial sourdough starter that I made, I actually ended up just getting rid of it just because I tried for over probably a month and a half to get it to double in size, and it would never consistently double in size. And I actually thought it was something in our air where we're doing renovations. I was not sure. I just got on forums online and started reading that a lot of people have issues with their houses, and some people, no matter what they do, they cannot make a sourdough starter. But I wasn't ready to give up, so I tried for about a month and a half, like I said, and I could not get it to work. It just would not double. It wouldn't make bread. So since we've been sick for like 3 weeks now, about 3 weeks ago, I started a new sourdough starter using stone ground flour. And I can try and link some down below, or I'll insert a picture or something, because it's a very expensive flour, but I get it from our Amish community, and so I get it at a cheaper price than what you can get online, because usually you have to have some kind of subscription to somebody that can wholesale buy it for you. But this flour has worked amazing, and the second feeding I was already getting my sourdough starter to double, and ever since then it has worked perfectly. So it had doubled, and now I'm trying to make bread with it. The stone ground flour, I have tried making several different recipes with it, and we don't necessarily enjoy the taste of it yet. It is something that you have to get used to. So for now, I'm only using it in my sourdough starter to feed my starter. But whenever I actually make the bread and make any sourdough recipes, I am using normal flour, but I actually picked up this organic bread flour, and I'm also using organic all-purpose flour. I'm using half and half. So we will see how this turns out, but it is all a learning experience, and sourdough is just very different than yeast, which is what I'm used to working with. And at our old house, I used to make tons of sourdough recipes, but I eventually just had to let it die, and unfortunately I have forgot a lot of those recipes, lost them in the move, and so I'm starting over essentially, and I'm starting back from the beginning because I just cannot remember, and I've just like lost that touch, because it does take you have to like know what you're doing almost, just because you have to get to know your sourdough starter, because it's so different than yeast, and it is such a longer process. With yeast, I feel like you can look up any recipe, and even a beginner baker can follow that recipe and it can turn out perfectly the very first time. But with sourdough starter and with sourdough recipes, it just seems to be the complete opposite. Unless you have a little bit of experience or at least a mature starter, then a lot of the times the recipes just will not turn out. And I've learned that the hard way, but I'm determined to not give up. I'm still going to stick with it and see if I can figure this out. After making my bread, I'm going to go ahead and feed my starter again and let it go ahead and sit out on the counter and start doubling in size again. And I will show you at the end of this video, which it's only about 3 or 4 hours after I feed it, but I will show you how much it has doubled, because I used to leave my starter overnight over at least 12 to 24 hours, and it would never double, and there would never be any indication that it was even bubbling or anything like that. Since we have been sick for several weeks now, and We're finally starting to feel a little bit better. Today I'm going to be working on cleaning the kitchen really well and just wiping down all of the surfaces. I don't know about you guys, but anytime that we are sick, we truly just go into a survival mode, and we put wood in the stove just to keep the house warm. We feed and water the animals, and then we feed ourselves, and that is about it. We do the bare minimum, and it truly shows. And it never ever fails that every time we are sick, that the farm truly just gets let go, and we have so much to catch up on out on the farm now. We need to bust more wood and get us ready for the start of the year, just because we know that here in Kentucky, usually our worst winter comes after January. So up until this point, we really haven't had a winter, but we know that after January, it'll probably hit us, and we need to be prepared for that. So we need to get some wood busted, but also we have got to mend some fences, because it seems like every time we're sick, either the cows get out, usually it's the cows, but we've never had pigs here yet, and this time it was the pigs. The pigs got out, and we were able to catch 2 of them and put them right back up. It wasn't a problem. And then 2 of them went missing, and we searched and searched, and I think that's why we ended up getting even more sick, is because we've been out until like 1 o'clock in the morning looking for pigs, and then one of them ended up finally walking back home on its own. We still have no idea where it went, but the next day we ended up getting a call from one of our neighbors, and they had our pig, so we had to go get it, but we had to get the cattle trailer and load it up that way. And once we got him back home, we thought that he would hear the other pigs and just want to go right back to them, but that was not the case at all. He ended up wanting to go into the opposite barn right in front of the barn where we keep our hogs. And we had to go round and round with him for hours trying to get him put up. And we finally did get him put back in with the hogs. And everybody is back in there, but being out in the cold like for hours for a couple days was definitely not helpful for us. But now we are finally feeling like we're on the mend, and we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we have got so much to catch up on. So now that we are feeling a little bit better, I am cleaning the dishes and just wiping everything down and sanitizing really well, and just trying to get things back in order. But this seemed like the perfect day to do it, just because we were actually going over to family's house for dinner. So I was not going to have to cook, and I was just ready to get the kitchen clean and just move on from everything. After we get a few things caught up on the farm, and then we have quite a few Christmas dinners and Christmas parties that we have to go to, and we're hoping that we feel well enough to do that. But after that, I'm hoping that we can get back to the dining room renovation. I've never wanted to get something more done in my entire life. I feel like we started with good momentum, and then things just slowly trickled down, and now there's just no progress getting done. But soon I hope we can get back to it, and I'm hoping after Christmas that we can go ahead and get the floor sander rented, get that done, and finish the ceiling, hang some wallpaper. We are not far from getting it done, but it's just time and money that we need to get, and we still need help hanging the drywall on the ceiling. So hopefully after Christmas and things slow down for us and for some of our family members, we can get them back over here and have them help us hang the drywall on the ceiling, because we're ready for a dining room. I cannot wait to be able to eat our meals just right through that doorway right there that you can see, and not have to go all the way upstairs to go eat our meals. In between cleaning, of course, I wash my hands, but I add the salt to my sourdough. And one of the things about sourdough is I kind of like to do it on days whenever I can hang out in the kitchen, just because it does take so long to do. So you kind of have to go back to back and just continuously always do something to it. So usually it takes 30-minute intervals, and then you have to go back and do something else to it. So after I added my flour and got it all mixed up, then you let it sit for 30 minutes, add your salt, let it sit for 30 minutes, and then you do your stretch and folds. every 30 minutes for 2 hours. So it is a very time consuming process, but it works perfect on a day like today, or just if you're spending all day in the kitchen, or if you're just going to be home all day and can go in your kitchen and do your stretch and folds and allow that time, because it can get a little tedious and it is just very different from yeast bread. So it is a learning curve. Something I get asked quite often is if we are ever going to get a vintage fridge for our kitchen, and we do still plan to, but as of now, I am not actively looking for a refrigerator anymore, just because I got so tired of dealing with the Facebook marketplace, and we would work out something with someone, we would be on our way to pick it up, and they would say that it already sold. That happened to us a few times, and it kind of puts you in a bad mood about it. So we have taken a step back from actively searching for a vintage fridge. We do still plan on getting one, but as of now, I'm not searching for one. I feel like the right one will just come along, and plus this fridge works perfectly fine, and there's really no need to get a new fridge unless I just find one for a good deal or just absolutely love it or something. But as of now, it's just not in the plans to get one, but hopefully someday I do want one. But I just don't like dealing with the Facebook marketplace and just trying to set up a schedule, trying to go pick it up, and then them text you and say that it already sold. So it's just not fun, and I don't enjoy it. So as of now, we will just stick with this fridge. Here I am just using that same towel that I had covering the bowl, and I'm going to lay it out into a more shallow bowl. It's probably about the size of the baskets that you put the sourdough bread in, and I'm just going to generously flour the towel just so that the dough does not stick to it. and you have to make sure that it is thoroughly coated and then smooth it out over top, or else the bread dough will stick every single time, and the dough is so hard to get out of the towel. So I learned the hard way the first time I did this, but just make sure it is very covered with flour. Next, I'm just going to lightly flour the stove, and I don't use the dough. I don't like to work dough on our kitchen counters just because they're wood. So that's why I have the marble pastry board that sits on the kitchen island. So I'll either work the dough on the stove or on the marble board on top of the kitchen island. And this particular day I just did the stove, but I absolutely love this stove just because I feel like there's a whole kitchen counter in the middle. It is just the handiest thing ever. So a lot of the times I do work my dough on top of the stove, and then I'll just make sure I clean it up immediately after so it doesn't stick to the stove or anything like that. But it is a great work surface, and something I never thought about the stove for is just the amount of workspace in the middle, but it truly is one of the most handy things ever. Like, I absolutely love this stove. Here I'm just shaping my loaf, and then I'm going to start building tension in my loaf and then add it to my basket. Not really a basket, just a bowl with my towel in it covered in flour, and then I'm going to cover it over and place it in the fridge overnight. In the wintertime, since we do lose so much daylight, Ben usually leaves for work around 5:30 and then gets home around 5:30. So he leaves whenever it's dark and he gets back home whenever it's dark. So I try and do the chores, especially on the evenings that we have something that we have to go do, like we're going to family dinner this evening. So we need to make sure that the chores are done in daylight. So before he gets home, I went ahead and did all of our evening chores, and it's honestly not that bad to do. It takes about an hour to do, which it's just feeding and watering everybody. If you follow me on Instagram, then you've already seen the chicks that we had. 2 of our hens sat on eggs and ended up hatching out. So they ended up hatching 4 chicks, but we lost 1. But they have been the best moms ever. We actually did not think that they were actually broody. We thought that they would just get up off the nest in a couple days, but they actually stayed the entire time. And so we have 2 mama hens, and they have been doing great with their chicks. But now it is time to collect eggs, and we try to get the chickens to lay in the coop, but they pretty much refuse. We've tried blocking off this hay with house wrap because we've had trouble with the chickens falling to the bottom of the haystack, and we have to try and dig them out, and it's just not enjoyable. But they pretty much refuse to lay in the hen house, so we have to climb up here and get our eggs every day, which as long as they lay in like one nest, that's not bad, but sometimes they do go all over the hay, which makes it a little more difficult, and we always find rotten eggs whenever we go to feed hay in the winter. But it is truly just part of having free-range chickens, and I feel like nobody ever talks about it. They just make it look picture perfect, but it's actually not picture perfect, and it's sometimes difficult to find the eggs, but once you find them, they usually lay there for quite some time, and you can collect the eggs pretty easily. And we have been selling our eggs lately, so we try and wash them immediately now, and we put them in these cartons and they go into the fridge. The chickens were all hanging outside of the coop and they were getting ready to go to bed. That is probably one of the best things about our chickens, is they all go up to the coop at night. We don't have any issues with them trying to roost in the barns or anything, which I'm so thankful for, because then we don't have to worry about predators at night. But here are the pigs that have been causing so much trouble here on the farm lately. But I was just making sure that they had some feed, and I ended up adding some more feed and topped off their water, and they were good to go. I didn't video it, but I did go and check on all of our beef cows, and they're doing just fine. They had plenty of hay and plenty of water, so they didn't need anything done this evening. But now it is time to put wood in the stove. A lot of people always wonder what we use for heating the house, and this is our outdoor wood furnace. And you just open up the bottom door, let some smoke out, open up the top door, let some smoke out, just so it doesn't fill your face full of smoke. And then you just start filling it full of wood. And the faster you can do it, the better, because the longer the door is open, the hotter the flame gets. So the flame does start like shooting out soon. So the faster you can do it, the better. But then also you have to do small pieces of wood and make sure you don't hit the lining of the stove really, because around the stove on the outside, it's called a water jacket. And if you throw a piece of wood, you can bust that, and then that would be awful because we would lose our heat source. So you just have to make sure you throw it in gently, but not hit the outside edges of the stove and bust the firebox or water jacket. We do love our wood furnace, but since our house is like 4,000 square foot, we had to get the commercial size stove. So it does eat a lot of wood, but it's kind of nice because it helps keep our electric bill down in the winter because we don't have any electric heaters. We have one in our upstairs bedroom, but it just runs occasionally if we need it. And then it does also heat our water, so we don't have to worry about that in the wintertime. The stove heats our water for us. So it is kind of nice, but it is a lot to keep up with, especially the amount of firewood it uses. Before I go get ready for dinner, I just wanted to show you guys how much the sourdough starter has doubled. But that is it for this video, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys will like and subscribe.